The millionaire's son never spoke until he saw the nanny doing something unbelievable. There are things money can't buy. And Ethan Cole had learned that the hardest way. 3 years. 3 long years without hearing a single word from his son. Since that rainy night that took his wife away, silence had become the only sound inside their home. Thick, heavy, the kind that hurts to breathe in. Their house sat on Queen Anne Hill, overlooking a fog-draped Seattle skyline. Glass walls, oak floors, Italian furniture, everything designed to perfection, everything lifeless. Sometimes neighbors would see the glow of a desk lamp through the window late at night, where Ethan sat alone with his laptop and a cup of coffee gone cold, as still as the walls around him. He had once been a celebrated architect, a man who built order out of chaos. But after that night, every blueprint lost its meaning. He built towers, shopping centers, beautiful homes, everything except a bridge back to his son. Liam was 6. His eyes mirrored his mother's, deep, kind, and impossibly sad. He hadn't smiled once since the night his world collapsed. That night, the rain came down hard. Ethan drove, one hand on the wheel, the other holding Anna's hand. She turned toward him, laughing, saying something he can no longer remember. 1 second. That's all it took. He looked at her smile. Then the blinding light of a truck, the crash, the screech of metal, the shattering glass. And then, the kind of silence that never leaves you. Ethan woke up to the smell of rain and blood. He survived. Anna didn't. In the back seat, Liam stared through a cracked window. No tears, no scream, no sound. From that night on, he never spoke again. 3 years passed. Ethan tried everything. Doctors, therapists, specialists, endless treatments. Hundreds of thousands spent, yet silence remained. Liam ate when food was placed in front of him, slept when lights went off, existed without really living. The mansion turned into a polished tomb. Ethan, once a visionary architect, became a man haunted by blueprints he couldn't fix, working 16-hour days just to avoid coming home. Mrs. Green, the aging housekeeper, stayed. She cleaned, cooked, cared for the boy as if he were her own grandchild. She watched the father collapse under guilt, watched the son disappear into a world without sound. The 11th nanny quit last week. No one could stand the weight of that silence, or of Ethan himself, the man who tried to control everything but pain. That morning, it rained again. Ethan stood before the mirror, tightening his tie, eyes hollow. His coffee sat untouched. Mrs. Green knocked softly. "I think I found someone who might help Liam," she said. Ethan didn't look up. "I've heard that before, Mrs. Green." She smiled gently. "She's not a doctor. No degrees, no titles. But I believe she understands something none of them ever did." Outside, the rain fell harder, steady, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of a city, mourning something it couldn't name. Ethan exhaled, grabbed his coat, and stepped out the door. He didn't know it yet, but that morning would be the last day his house stayed silent, because Clara Dawson was already on her way. Outside, the rain kept falling. Seattle never really dried, but that morning the drops felt slower, softer, as if the whole sky was waiting for something to change. Ethan didn't know why he'd woken up earlier than usual. He stood by the window, watching the trails of rain slide down the glass, a quiet unease pressing in his chest. Maybe it was because of what Mrs. Green had said the night before. She'll be here tomorrow morning. A woman, no degree, no resume, only the faith of an old housekeeper. Ethan didn't believe in miracles, but part of him didn't want to stop them either. The doorbell rang. Mrs. Green hurried to open it, and there she was, Clara Dawson. She wore a worn brown coat, hair tied neatly back, boots still damp with rain. In her hand, an old leather suitcase that looked like it had traveled through too many hard years. But it was her eyes that stilled the room, calm, steady, with the kind of depth that doesn't demand attention, yet quietly owns it. Ethan stepped out of his office, brows furrowed. "I thought you said she wasn't a doctor." Clara smiled faintly. "I'm not? Then what are you?" "I'm someone who tries to understand children when adults can't." Her voice carried no arrogance, no apology, only a strange composure that disarmed him for a second. "I've paid for the best specialists," Ethan said coldly. "They all failed. I don't trust anyone anymore." "I'm not here for your trust," Clara replied calmly. "I'm here to listen to your son." "And you think you can do what a dozen doctors couldn't?" "I'm not here to do anything. I'm here to make space for him to want to speak." "That sounds like cheap philosophy." "Maybe," she said softly. "But sometimes the simplest things are what people forget most." Mrs. Green stood aside, saying nothing, but her eyes caught a flicker of something in Ethan's. Not belief, not yet, but a small crack in the walls he'd built around himself. Finally, Ethan exhaled. "Fine, 3 months. You can try. But I want to know everything you do, every minute, every detail." Clara met his gaze. "If you truly want me to help, then you'll have to let me do it my way. No supervision, no reports, just trust." Ethan gave a short, bitter laugh. "Trust isn't exactly my thing." "Then maybe," she said quietly. "That's the first thing we'll learn." A breeze slipped through the hallway, carrying the scent of rain and pine. Clara walked slowly across the wooden floor, where the first pale light of morning fought its way through gray clouds. On the stairs, Liam sat clutching an old teddy bear, eyes wide at the sight of a stranger. Clara didn't approach, just paused a few steps away and lowered her voice. "Hi there," she said softly. "Beautiful rain today, isn't it?" Then she smiled and walked past, leaving behind the faint trace of earth after rain. Ethan watched her, feeling something stir inside him. Small, fragile, unfamiliar. After 3 years of emptiness, he'd forgotten what it felt like when someone walked into a room and made it breathe again. In that moment, the rain outside and the silence inside seemed to blend into one rhythm. He didn't know why he kept watching her as she walked down the hall, stopping at Liam's door. Her hand rested on the knob. Her voice was barely a whisper. "We'll start with silence. Because sometimes it's in the silence that you finally hear what really matters." The house felt even quieter after Clara stepped into Liam's room, as if everything inside it was holding its breath. Ethan stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets, ready to leave, but somehow unable to move. Something, he couldn't name it, kept him there. It wasn't hope, not yet, but something close, fragile, and unfamiliar. Clara pushed the door open. Dim light spilled into a large, still room. Toys were everywhere. A model train, a small airplane, a shelf of untouched books, all coated in a fine layer of dust. It was a room built with love, but abandoned by life. Liam sat on the rug, his back against the bed, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. He didn't look up when she entered. There was no fear, no curiosity, just the kind of quiet that belongs to someone who's learned that nothing new ever stays. Clara set down her suitcase, slipped off her shoes, and sat on the floor a few feet away. She didn't speak, didn't try to fill the silence. The only sounds were the rain tapping on the roof and the small clock ticking on the shelf. Time moving gently, unhurried. Then, softly, Clara began to sing. A slow, old lullaby, maybe something her mother once sang to her. Her voice wasn't perfect, but it was warm, human, real. The melody floated through the room, brushing the air, reaching the boy like a whisper meant only for him. Liam's shoulders shifted slightly. His eyes stayed down, but his hands stopped tightening around the bear. Clara kept singing, still not looking at him. By the third verse, he tilted his head, just a fraction, to listen. Clara noticed but said nothing. She only smiled, letting the song linger, tender and patient. It wasn't a miracle, just a sound finding its way back to where silence had been for too long. The sunlight pushed through the thin curtain, painting the floor in gold. Dust drifted in the beam, slow and weightless, as if time itself had stopped to listen. Liam lifted his head. Their eyes met. His, guarded but searching, hers, calm, unwavering. There was no pity there, no urgency, only presence. For a long second, they simply looked at each other. Then Liam turned away, hugging his teddy bear tighter, testing if this small flicker of connection was real. In the hallway, Ethan watched through the narrow gap of the door. He saw his son move, barely, but enough to make something inside him break open. He didn't know what it was, fear of hoping again or the first fragile spark of belief. Clara stopped singing. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. She spoke softly, not looking at the boy. Sometimes you don't need words to be understood. You just need someone willing to stay long enough. Liam looked at her again, eyes softer now, less distant. Outside, the rain had stopped. A single ray of light slipped through the clouds and fell across them. A woman carrying her own quiet pain, and a boy lost inside his. Two wounded souls recognizing each other without a sound. Ethan stepped back, eyes stinging. He hadn't realized he was holding his breath. For the first time in 3 years, the silence inside his home didn't feel like punishment anymore. That night, Ethan barely slept. He lay awake, listening to the rain on the roof, a strange feeling pressing against his chest. Something had shifted, quietly, and he didn't yet know how to name it. The image of Liam's eyes meeting the woman's lingered in his mind. Small, fragile, but real. For the first time in 3 years, something inside this house had moved. The next morning, the rain had stopped. Pale light slipped through the curtains, touching the polished floor. Ethan stepped out of his room, expecting the same silence, the coffee smell, the cold air, the empty space, until he heard something unfamiliar, the sound of a pan, a knife, and someone softly laughing. He walked to the kitchen. Liam stood on a little wooden stool beside Clara, his small hand in hers, pointing at eggs and pancake mix. The counter was a mess, flour everywhere, milk spilled, sticky chaos, but it felt alive. Ethan froze at the doorway. The sight of his son moving, doing something that wasn't forced, felt foreign and tender at once. Clara turned, smiling warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Cole. We're trying breakfast today. You can help by sitting down." "I don't eat breakfast," Ethan replied. "I've got a meeting at 8. 15 minutes, Clara said calmly. "No talking required. Just sit. Let him see you here." Ethan glanced at Liam. The boy was focused on stirring the batter, his tiny hands covered in flour. For a moment, their eyes met. Not long, not deep, but he didn't look away. Ethan walked to the table and sat down. Clara smiled and turned back to the stove. The scent of warm butter filled the room. The pan sizzled. The knife hit the cutting board. The spoon stirred milk. Every small sound felt heavy with meaning, as if the house was learning to breathe again. Liam placed the first pancake on a plate, uneven, slightly burned at the edges, but he smiled just a little. Ethan saw it, a small, real smile that felt like sunlight breaking through fog. He looked away quickly, hiding the sting in his eyes. Clara sat down and handed him a plate. "Not bad for a first try, right?" "Did he make this?" Ethan asked, voice rough. "Both of us," she said. "But the hardest part was getting you to sit." She grinned. Ethan let out a quiet laugh, short but genuine. They ate together, no words needed. Only the sound of forks, the soft hiss of the cooling pan, and 3 steady heartbeats filling a house that had forgotten what life sounded like. That afternoon, the sun slipped weakly through the thick Seattle clouds. After breakfast, Liam sat quietly by the window, staring at the backyard, where raindrops from the night before still clung to the grass, glimmering like tiny shards of glass. Clara walked over and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Want to go outside?" He didn't answer, just glanced at her before looking down again. She smiled. "That's okay. We'll just walk a bit. No talking needed." They stepped onto the porch. The air smelled of wet earth, jasmine, and leaves stirring in the wind. When they reached the middle of the yard, Clara crouched down and began to take off his shoes. "The grass is still wet," she said softly. "But sometimes that's the best part." Liam hesitated, then let her. When his bare feet touched the damp ground, he flinched, then stilled. A soft breeze swept through his hair. The sun peeked out, and for a fleeting moment, Clara saw him take a deep breath, the kind that belongs to someone learning to feel again. Walking beside him, she spoke quietly. "Sometimes we can't change what's already happened, but we can choose how to live with it." Liam looked up at her, eyes wide, as if hearing something both new and familiar. Clara bent down, picked up a fallen leaf, turning it slowly between her fingers. "I used to be silent too," she said, voice low. "For a long time, after I lost someone I loved, I didn't want to talk or listen or feel, because feeling meant hurting again." The wind paused. Liam watched her, eyes filling, understanding in ways words could never reach. His small fingers gripped the teddy bear tighter, his lips trembling. One tear slid down his cheek, then another. And then the dam broke. Sobs rising, shaking, raw. He threw his arms around Clara, crying as if the world had finally given him permission to let go. Clara said nothing. She simply held him, her hand stroking his hair, letting him cry for as long as he needed. The sound of his sobs filled the garden, mixing with the wind and the fading light, a melody made of pain and release. From the window, Mrs. Green watched silently. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered to herself, "That sound. It's the most beautiful thing this house has ever heard." That night, the house felt quiet in a different way. Not dead, just tired, as if emotions themselves needed to rest. From his room, Ethan heard soft footsteps in the hall. Clara was walking Liam back to bed after their time in the garden. The boy clung to her hand tightly. His face was puffy from crying, but his eyes held something new, a strange, fragile peace. Clara whispered something he couldn't hear, then gently closed the door. Ethan leaned against the wall, watching, a knot forming in his chest. Gratitude mixed with unease. He was glad Liam was changing, but terrified too. Terrified of losing control, of someone else stepping into the space he'd guarded for so long. Hours passed. The house slept. The only light left was from his desk lamp. Ethan stared at the blueprints, the lines blurring together. Every time he blinked, he saw Liam's small arms around Clara, heard his son's cry in her arms. Something raw twisted inside him. Jealousy, guilt, maybe both. Finally, he stood and walked out. The living room light was still on. Clara sat there, eyes closed, exhaustion etched on her face. "What do you think you're doing?" Ethan's voice was rough. She opened her eyes slowly. "Helping your son." "Helping?" He laughed bitterly. "By singing lullabies? You don't take notes, don't record progress, no therapy sessions. It's been 3 weeks. What exactly is your method?" Clara's calm gaze didn't waver. "Your son isn't a patient, Mr. Cole. He's a child. What he needs isn't treatment. It's to be seen." Ethan clenched his fists. "You don't understand. You've been here a few weeks. You have no idea what we've been through." I know you lost someone, Clara said quietly. And you're afraid to lose again, afraid to love again, afraid to trust what you can't control. He turned away sharply. Don't pretend you understand me. I don't have to pretend, she said softly. I see it, in the way you avoid looking at him, in the way you bury yourself in work so you don't have to hear this house breathe. You can't bear the sound because it reminds you of that night. Her words hit him like a punch. He froze. For a moment he couldn't breathe. The only sound was the rain tapping against the glass. Then Clara's tone gentled. I'm not here to ruin your life, Ethan. I just want to help that boy find his voice again. And maybe, somewhere in that process, you'll find yours too. Ethan said nothing. In the dim light, his face looked older, weighed down by something too heavy to name. Clara watched him a moment longer, then turned and left the room. Early the next morning, Ethan passed by Liam's room. The small lamp was still on. The door was ajar. He peeked inside. Clara sat beside the bed, asleep in the chair, a blanket slipping off her shoulder. Liam was tucked in, sleeping peacefully. Ethan hesitated, then walked in quietly. He reached for the blanket and pulled it gently over her. His hand trembled, not from fear this time, but from something softer. For the first time in years, he didn't feel haunted by loss. He felt the fragile warmth of something finding its way back to life. That afternoon, sunlight slipped through the window, painting long lines across the floor. The house was quiet. The only sound came from Ethan's pencil scratching against paper. Then he heard something else. Faint, uneven, warm. Guitar strings. He froze for a second, then followed the sound. It led him to the living room. Clara sat on the old armchair, guitar on her lap. Liam was right beside her, watching her hands move across the strings. His head bobbed slightly, his small palms tapping softly on his knees, careful not to break the moment. "Want to try?" Clara asked. Liam hesitated, then nodded. She handed him the guitar. He strummed once, loud, sharp, out of tune. Clara laughed. Liam blinked, then laughed too. The sound was small but bright, the first laugh in 3 years. Ethan stood at the doorway, frozen. He couldn't remember when he last heard that sound. His son's laughter. And now it filled the house again, fragile but real, like sunlight after rain. Clara looked at him. "Your turn?" He raised an eyebrow. "Me? I can't play." "Perfect. That's how the best songs start." He took the guitar awkwardly, plucked a string. The note came out wrong. Painfully wrong. Liam giggled. He tried again, even worse. Clara burst out laughing, and so did Liam. Soon Ethan was laughing too, the kind of laugh that breaks through years of silence without asking permission. "Told you," Clara said, smiling. "It doesn't have to be right. It just has to be real." For a moment, Ethan just looked at his son. Liam was smiling. Actually smiling. 3 years of silence and grief. And here he was, laughing over a bad chord. Ethan looked away quickly, pretending to tune the guitar. As the day faded, they kept playing in fragments, a few notes here and there, the silence between them turning soft instead of sharp. The house was breathing again. Later that night, Liam went to bed early, his face peaceful. Ethan wandered through the hallway and stopped at the library, a room he hadn't entered since Anna died. The door was half open, warm lamplight spilled out. Clara stood by the shelves, tracing her fingers along the spines of old books. "You play beautifully," Ethan said quietly. "Thanks," she said. "My husband taught me. He used to play every night before our son went to sleep." Ethan froze. "You had a son?" She nodded. "I did. Both my husband and my little boy died. Car accident. 3 years ago." The air seemed to leave the room. Ethan's throat tightened. She went on, her voice steady, distant. It was raining that night. A truck hit the car in front of us. It spun out, then slid back and hit us. I survived. They didn't. When I woke up in the hospital, I remembered the headlights and a man running toward us. He looked terrified. Ethan's heart stopped. Was the car silver? She looked at him, calm, sad. Yes. Silence fell. He could barely stand. So, you were in the car behind us, he whispered. She nodded slowly. I hated you, Ethan, for a long time. I couldn't hear the rain without wanting to scream. But hate doesn't feed anyone. It just keeps you dying over and over. He sat down, covering his face. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I know, she said gently, stepping closer, resting a hand on his shoulder. If I'd stayed angry, I wouldn't be here. Your boy needed me. But maybe I needed him too. He looked up. Their eyes met in the dim light. Two people who had both survived the same night, both carrying guilt too heavy for words. There was nothing left to say, only silence. But this time, it wasn't the silence of loss. It was the silence of forgiveness. Outside, it began to rain again, and for once, neither of them were afraid. The next morning, Seattle was wrapped in a soft gray fog. Inside the house, everything felt calm. Liam sat at the table, coloring, while Clara brewed coffee. Ethan watched them from the hallway, unsure how to speak after the night before. Something between them had changed. Not anger, not peace, just something fragile, waiting. Then came the knock. Mrs. Green opened the door. Two people stood outside, a doctor and a social services officer, both in neat suits, both carrying folders. Good morning. We're here to check on Liam Cole, the woman said. By regulation, any ongoing therapy must be licensed. You're Ms. Clara Dawson? Clara nodded slowly. Yes, that's me. The doctor scanned the room. We've been informed you lack formal certification. We need to verify the kind of treatment you're conducting here. Ethan stepped forward. Wait, you've got it wrong. She's not running therapy, she's just... Then why is she living here? The woman cut him off. And why has the boy shown sudden emotional changes? Who's responsible if something goes wrong? The air thickened. Clara stayed silent, calm as always. Ethan's pulse quickened. Old fear crept back, fear of losing control, of losing his son, of losing this fragile peace. I just want what's best for my boy, he said quietly. Maybe we should pause for a while, Clara, until things clear up. The words broke her. Clara looked at him, her smile fading. Pause? She echoed. I thought you were starting to believe. He looked away. I can't risk losing him. She nodded, voice trembling just slightly. I understand. Everyone's afraid of losing what they love. Liam watched, confused, sensing the tension. The woman walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. Don't worry, sweetheart. We just need Ms. Dawson to come with us for a bit. Everything will be fine. Clara knelt to meet his eyes, forcing a smile. It's okay, Liam. I'll be right back. But when the woman reached for Clara's arm, Liam suddenly jumped up. His face flushed red, lips trembling. He tried to speak. At first only air came out, then raw and broken. Don't take her! The world stopped. Mrs. Green gasped, dropping her teacup. Ethan froze. Clara turned slowly, disbelief in her eyes. Liam's voice rose, stronger now, shaking with tears. Don't take her away. She helped me talk. The house erupted in silence, that kind of silence that swallows every sound except a heartbeat. 3 years of stillness shattered in an instant. Ethan fell to his knees, trembling. He grabbed his son's shoulders. You spoke. Oh, God, Liam, you spoke? Clara covered her mouth, tears spilling. She knelt beside them, pulling Liam into her arms, sobbing and laughing at once. The doctor stood still, glasses in hand, his eyes wet. She just did what medicine couldn't, he murmured. The social worker hesitated, then nodded. We won't interfere, not after this. When they left, the house went quiet again. But this time it was the good kind of quiet, full of breathing, full of life. Ethan sat on the floor, still shaking. He looked at Clara, the woman who had brought his son back and maybe brought him back too. He realized what he'd truly feared all along wasn't losing control. It was loving again. I'm sorry, he said softly, for doubting you, for being afraid, for making you do this alone. Clara shook her head gently. No one can love while they're still afraid. We both need time. He nodded. I'll wait. She smiled faintly, placing a hand on his arm. We have to learn how to love after knowing what it's like to lose. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft and steady. Inside, Liam sat between them, his small hands reaching for theirs. They sat together in silence, listening to the rain and to the sound of a miracle that had finally found its way home. The next morning, Seattle finally woke to sunlight, soft, golden, and warm. Liam sat on the floor with his old teddy bear. He didn't speak much, just short, broken words, but each one felt like the house itself was breathing again. Ethan stood in the hallway watching, his eyes wet when he heard his son mumble, "Pancakes." Clara laughed and headed for the kitchen. So that's your way of asking for breakfast? They cooked together. No tension this time. Just small, ordinary sounds, the knife slicing fruit, the pan sizzling, Liam giggling when Ethan spilled milk. The kitchen smelled of butter and warmth. Clara felt something in her chest, a mix of joy and fear. Things were too peaceful, too beautiful. She was scared it might all disappear. After breakfast, Ethan stepped outside. The garden sparkled with dew under the morning light. He stood there until he heard footsteps. Clara walked out with 2 cups of coffee. "He's in the living room," she said, handing him one. "Drawing? I think he's drawing you." Ethan smiled faintly. "Let's hope I don't look too awful." They sat on the porch. For a while, neither spoke, only the sound of wind, birds, and Liam humming softly from inside. Ethan took a sip of coffee, voice low. "I still can't believe it. I thought he'd never talk again. I'd given up." Clara looked at him gently. "But he didn't. And neither did you, Ethan. You just got scared of hoping." He nodded. "Yeah, hope is dangerous. Every time I believed in something, I lost it. My wife, my son, myself." "What about now?" she asked. He looked at her, eyes raw. "Now I'm scared of losing you." Clara didn't answer right away. The morning light touched her face, her eyes soft and deep. "You can't lose me, Ethan. I was never yours to lose. I came here to help your boy find his voice, and maybe to help you find your heart." He turned away. "If you leave, I'm afraid everything will fall apart again." She smiled, sad but kind. "That's where you're wrong. Life doesn't depend on who stays. It lives in the smallest things. A smile, a drawing, a breakfast." He found his voice. "Now it's your turn to learn to love." He breathed out, almost a laugh. "You're my teacher now?" "No," she said softly. "Life is. I'm just here to remind you." From the window, Liam called out, "Dad! Clara! Look!" They turned. The boy ran out, holding a piece of paper covered in bright crayon lines. 3 figures stood beneath the sun, a man, a woman, and a child between them, holding hands. Above, in shaky letters, "My family." Ethan's vision blurred. He knelt, hugging his son tight. "Thank you, Liam." Clara stood nearby, smiling through tears. She knew she would have to leave soon, but this moment, the laughter, the sunlight, the sound of life, made everything worth it. Ethan rose and turned to her. He took her hand, his voice steady. "Wherever you go, there'll always be a place for you here." Clara squeezed his hand gently. "Then keep this light alive, Ethan. Don't let it fade again." "I'll learn," he whispered. "This time I won't run." She looked at him, then out at the garden. Light bathed everything, the trees, the grass, their faces. Liam laughed, the sound echoing across the yard, bright and pure, like forgiveness itself. Clara closed her eyes and smiled. After all this time, they had learned the one thing that mattered most: to love, even after loss. Months had passed since the day Liam spoke his first words. Spring arrived in Seattle, sunlight soft and golden over the hill. The house on Queen Anne was no longer a place of silence. It had become the heart of something new. Outside the gate, a wooden sign gleamed in the light. The Haven. A home for healing. Inside, laughter filled the air. Green grass, yellow flowers, and somewhere, the sound of a familiar guitar. Children ran barefoot across the garden, paint on their fingers, joy on their faces. Clara sat among them, sleeves rolled up, a streak of color on her cheek. She looked younger, lighter, like she'd finally let go of all the storm she'd carried. Ethan stood by the window, taking it all in. He never thought he'd build something not for profit, but for peace. Every corner of the Haven carried a story. Liam's first smile, Clara's quiet tears, his own slow forgiveness. That afternoon, they held the opening ceremony. People gathered in the garden, music and chatter floating in the breeze. Clara stood beside Ethan, holding Liam's hand. The boy was taller now, more confident. When they called his name, he walked to the microphone, his small fingers gripping it tightly. He paused, then said, voice trembling but clear, "She didn't teach me how to talk. She taught me how to feel." For a moment, silence. Then applause, long, warm, honest. Clara bowed her head, tears glistening, and Ethan's heart swelled with pride. Every scar, every loss had led them to this exact moment. That night, the center was quiet again. The soft glow of lamps spilled onto the porch. Ethan and Clara sat side by side, cups of tea steaming in their hands. From inside, Liam's laughter echoed as he played with a small dog. Ethan spoke softly, eyes on the garden. "Clara, do you ever wonder if we deserve to be happy?" She turned to him, her smile calm, steady. "Yes, because we chose forgiveness over hatred." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The wind carried the scent of jasmine. They sat in silence, watching the garden, the small patch of earth where new flowers were already blooming. Proof that even the hardest soil could bloom again, if given enough care. From inside, Liam laughed once more. Clara smiled, the sound wrapping around them like warmth. Ethan exhaled, voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe? This is what home feels like." "Not maybe," Clara said softly. "It is?" Above them, the rain began to fall, light, silver, gentle. The Haven glowed in the night, a quiet promise to the world that even after loss, even after silence, there is always a way to begin again.